The name Napoleon Bonaparte conjures a very specific image: a supreme military commander, an unstoppable force marching across Europe, conquering empires and dragging cannons over the freezing, jagged peaks of the Alps. The British General Wellington, who spent years fighting against him, stated that seeing Napoleon take the field was like adding 40,000 troops to the enemy army. But look past the battlefield, and a completely different person emerges. Off the front lines, the Emperor of France was a socially awkward, deeply insecure loner who spent most of his childhood hiding in books and lived entirely inside his own imagination. The exact same man trying to conquer a continent would sit in his palace, painstakingly filling a notebook with the exact inventory of every sock, bedsheet, and napkin he owned. He even audited his court's sugar consumption and researched local market prices to make sure his staff wasn't overpaying. To truly understand Napoleon, you have to look past the artillery fire and the brilliant flanking maneuvers. The real driver of his decisions was a bizarre, deeply insecure private life. At just 24 years old, Napoleon was promoted to brigadier general. Shortly after, he was tearing through northern Italy, turning a neglected, starving mob of soldiers into a lethal fighting force that brought the Austrian Empire to its knees. To his men, he projected absolute authority and relentless confidence. His private behavior during that exact same campaign paints a stark contrast. He was newly married to an older, much more experienced woman named Josephine, and he was hopelessly obsessed with her. Every single day, he wrote her angsty, desperate letters. It was the equivalent of sending massive walls of text to someone, leaving you unread. Josephine wasn't returning his letters. She was openly cheating on him back in Paris. Worse, she found his dramatic letters so pathetic that she would actually read them out loud to her friends for a laugh. A man who negotiated peace treaties, redrew the borders of nations, and forced armies to surrender was powerless to secure respect from his wife. It is easy to assume Napoleon dominated Europe entirely through superior troop maneuvers and artillery placement. His actual superpower was something much more modern: public relations. Take the battle at the Bridge of Arcole. Under heavy fire, Napoleon grabbed a flag and charged forward to inspire his men. But the heroic charge failed miserably. Instead of crossing the bridge, he was thrown backward into a ditch and dragged out of the mud. Back in Paris, the story was quite different. He sent home a polished dispatch detailing a glorious, flag-waving victory where he bravely led his troops. The embellished report went completely viral. This chart shows exactly how his post-battle spin worked. Notice the skyrocketing numbers in the red columns. Those represent the wildly inflated enemy casualties. The tiny blue columns show his own troop losses, artificially suppressed to near zero. He systematically manipulated the data after every engagement to build a godlike brand. By controlling the information reaching the public, Napoleon transformed himself into an invincible icon. This meticulously crafted image allowed him to maintain his authority and keep his political rivals at bay, even when his actual military maneuvers resulted in failure. By his mid-30s, his ego had matched his mythology. He organized an opulent ceremony in Notre Dame, took the crown directly from the Pope's hands, and crowned himself Emperor of France. He demanded absolute loyalty and forcefully installed his own brothers and sisters as kings and queens across Europe. The empire, however, was managed by men like the elegant chief diplomat Talleyrand and the ruthless chief of police Fouché. These two men absolutely despised each other, but were lethal, highly calculating political survivors who always made sure they ended up on the winning side. While Napoleon was distracted by dictating the specific number of towels in his palace and demanding impossible embargoes against British goods, he failed to see what was happening right in front of him. His ballooning ego blinded him to his own advisors. Recognizing that the emperor's erratic demands were driving the country toward a cliff, Talleyrand and Fouché quietly went to work. Behind his back, they began secretly negotiating with Russia and Austria to secure their own futures. The ultimate micromanager, obsessing over every bedsheet and political border on the European continent, was entirely oblivious to the treason brewing inside his own court. These two warring sides of his personality, the macro delusions of invincibility and the desperate need to micromanage every detail, finally collided in 1812, when he decided to invade Russia. The invasion was a logistical nightmare that his micromanagement couldn't solve. As the Grand Army was pulled deeper into the vast, sparsely populated Russian interior, his control over his supplies and his men disintegrated. Hundreds of thousands died from starvation and disease long before the Russian winter even arrived. When he finally hobbled back to Paris with a fraction of his army, the trap snapped shut. His treacherous advisors, his politicians, and even his oldest, most trusted marshals defected. Without their support, he was forced to step down. He briefly clawed his way back to power, only to be crushed at Waterloo and exiled for a second time. The man who once held the entire continent hostage ended his life trapped on St. Helena, a miserable, wind-swept rock in the middle of the South Atlantic. Even in isolation, he could not stop managing his image. He spent his final years obsessively dictating his memoirs, carefully shaping his justifications to ensure history would remember him strictly on his terms. Napoleon Bonaparte was a genuinely gifted strategist, but his enduring legacy as an invincible god of war is also a product of his own design. By blending his battlefield victories with a lifelong obsession for managing public perception, he ensured that history would focus on the emperor he claimed to be, rather than the insecure micromanager who struggled to control his own court.